The last thing I expected to hear at my parents' will reading was that I'd become my brother's babysitter. Yet there I sat, gripping the armrests of an antique leather chair, as Edgar, our family lawyer, delivered the news that would shatter my world. My name is Sage, and at 28 I thought I'd finally earned my parents' respect. I'd put myself through business school, built a successful career, and even helped manage their real estate holdings. My brother Calvin? He couldn't keep a job at a fast food joint for more than a week. The entirety of the Fisher estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, will pass to Calvin Fisher, Edgar read, his voice echoing through the mahogany-panelled office, with the stipulation that his sister, Saj Fisher, act as his guardian and financial advisor until such time as he demonstrates fiscal responsibility. This has to be a joke, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad always said the business would be mine. Calvin slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. Tough break, sis. Mr. and Mrs. Fisher were quite clear in their intentions, Edgar said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. They believed this arrangement would benefit both of you. My best friend Louisa, who'd come for moral support, squeezed my hand. Saigi, breathe. I've been breathing for 28 years, I snapped, standing up. I've been breathing while working 60-hour weeks while Calvin blew through 3 colleges on our parents' dime. I've been breathing while watching him crash 2 luxury cars they bought him. Calvin finally looked up. Hey, that second one wasn't my fault. That tree came out of nowhere. Trees tend to do that when you're drunk at noon on a Tuesday, I shot back. Edgar cleared his throat. There are additional provisions. I don't care about additional provisions, I said, grabbing my purse. I need air. I stormed out of the office and into the hallway where framed photos of 3 generations of lawyers stared down at me. Louisa followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. This isn't right, she said, catching up. There has to be something we can do. Like what? Sue my dead parents? Maybe talk to another lawyer? There must be. Sage. Edgar's voice stopped us. He stood in his doorway holding a small box. Your grandmother left this for you. I was instructed to give it to you today regardless of circumstances. I took the box, a simple wooden thing with a tarnished brass latch. Grandma Gwen. She died 5 years ago. She was very specific about the timing, Edgar said, then hesitated. Your grandmother was an interesting woman. Back in my apartment that evening, I sat cross-legged on my bed, staring at the box. Louisa brought over wine and takeout, but I couldn't eat. Open it, she urged, pouring me another glass. What's the worst that could be in there? More disappointment? I clicked open the latch. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with age, with my name written in my grandmother's elegant script. The letter was dated just weeks before her death. My dearest Sage, I read aloud, hands trembling. If you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. Your parents' will wasn't supposed to play out this way. There's something you need to know about your inheritance, your true inheritance. Louisa leaned forward. What does that mean? I continued reading. The truth lies behind the portrait in the blue room. You'll know which one. But be careful who you trust, my dear. Not everything in our family is as it seems, and not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. The blue room? Louisa asked. At your parents' house? I nodded, memories flooding back. Grandma's old sitting room. Dad never changed it after she died, said it was too painful. What portrait? There's only one, a huge painting of the estate from the 1800s. I folded the letter carefully. And now that house belongs to my brother. Louisa grinned. Good thing you're his guardian then. When do we start snooping? I stared at the letter, my grandmother's words burning in my mind. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something besides anger, hope. Tomorrow, I said, finishing my wine. We start tomorrow. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the way Edgar had looked at me when he handed over the box, the careful way he'd chosen his words about my grandmother. He knew something. They all knew something. And I was going to find out what it was. The next morning, I let myself into my childhood home using the spare key I still had from when I used to check on my parents. The house felt different now. Emptier. Colder somehow. Calvin was probably still passed out at his apartment across town. "This feels wrong," Louisa whispered as we climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, like we're breaking and entering. "I'm his legal guardian now, remember? Everything I do is technically legitimate." I tried to sound confident, but my hands were shaking as I pushed open the door to the blue room. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room remained exactly as my grandmother had left it, pale blue wallpaper, antique furniture draped in white sheets, and that massive portrait dominating the far wall. "Help me move this chair," I said, positioning myself beneath the painting. The frame alone must have weighed 50 pounds. As we carefully lifted the portrait away from the wall, something fluttered to the floor. A manila envelope, yellowed with age, had been taped to the back of the canvas. "Jackpot," Louisa breathed. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were several documents and another letter from my grandmother. "My darling girl," I read aloud. "If you're reading this, you've taken the first step toward claiming what's rightfully yours. The estate wasn't just built on your grandfather's money, it was built on mine. The Fisher fortune came from my family's shipping business, which I signed over to your grandfather when we married. But I made provisions." "What kind of provisions?" Louisa interrupted. I scanned through the documents, my heart racing. "These are incorporation papers for a separate company, Gwendolyn Enterprises. According to this, it owns 40% of all Fisher family holdings." "And who owns Gwendolyn Enterprises?" Before I could answer, we heard the front door slam downstairs. "Hello," Calvin's voice echoed through the house. "Seiji, your car's outside." "Shit," I whispered, scrambling to stuff the papers back in the envelope. "Help me with the portrait." We barely got the painting back on the wall when Calvin appeared in the doorway, looking hungover in yesterday's clothes. "What are you doing up here?" he asked, squinting suspiciously. "Just showing Louisa around," I said smoothly. "Since I'm managing the estate now, I need to inventory everything." "Whatever." He waved his hand dismissively. "Listen, I need money. The credit cards aren't working." "I froze them this morning," I said. "Part of my new guardian duties." His face reddened. "You can't do that. It's my money." "Actually, I can. And I did." I stepped closer, enjoying the flash of uncertainty in his eyes. "Things are going to be different now, Calvin. No more unlimited spending. No more parties. No more treating this house like your personal hotel." "This is bullshit." He kicked a sheet-covered chair. "I'll call Edgar." "Go ahead. He'll tell you the same thing." I pulled out my phone. "Want me to dial for you?" He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The portrait rattled on the wall. "That was kind of badass," Louisa said with a grin. Back at my apartment that evening, I spread the documents across my dining table. The incorporation papers were just the beginning. There were letters, photographs, and detailed notes about business dealings going back decades. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a paragraph in one of my grandmother's letters. She writes about a secret account set up for me, but the details are in something called the Red Ledger. "What's that?" "I don't know, but..." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone. Alexandra." "Who's Alexandra?" Louisa asked, reading over my shoulder. "My cousin. Dad's sister's daughter." I hadn't seen her in years. "She works in finance in New York. What's she doing in town?" "Could be a trap," Louisa warned. "Your grandmother did say to be careful who you trust." I stared at the text, thinking about the documents hidden in my bag, about Calvin's tantrum, about all the years I'd spent trying to prove myself. "I have to go," I said finally. "Alexandra might know something about the Red Ledger, and right now I need all the allies I can get." "Just be careful," Louisa said, hugging me goodbye. This is starting to feel bigger than just a will dispute. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother sitting in her blue room, writing letters by candlelight. In the dream, she looked up at me and smiled, but her eyes were sad. "Follow the thread, my dear," she whispered. "But remember, once you pull it, everything might unravel." I woke up at dawn, her words echoing in my mind. Whatever I discovered in Riverside Park today would change everything. I could feel it in my bones. Riverside Park was deserted at 10 a.m. except for a few joggers and an elderly man walking his dog. I spotted Alexandra sitting on a bench overlooking the water, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked more like a Wall Street executive than a cousin at a family reunion. "You're punctual," she said as I sat down. "Just like Aunt Gwen. Why did you want to meet?" Alexandra pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of an old leather-bound book with a red cover. "Looking for this." My heart skipped. "The Red Ledger." "I found it in my mother's study last night. She's been keeping it all these years." Alexandra's voice was tight. "Do you have any idea what's in it?" "No, but I found some documents." "Don't tell me here." She glanced around nervously. "We need somewhere private. Follow me to my hotel." 20 minutes later, we sat in Alexandra's suite at the Marriott. I spread my grandmother's documents on the coffee table while she retrieved the ledger from her suitcase. "Mum always said Aunt Gwen was the real power behind the family," Alexandra said, handling the book carefully. But I never understood what she meant until I read this. The ledger was filled with detailed financial records, but also personal notes. My grandmother had documented everything: business deals, family secrets, and a complex web of hidden accounts. "Look at this entry from 1995, Alexandra pointed to a page. "Your father tried to sell off part of the shipping business behind Grandma's back. She caught him and forced him to sign these papers." She pulled out a document that made my hands shake. It was a contract stating that if the shipping business was ever sold without the approval of Gwendolyn Enterprises, all family assets would revert to the company. "3 months ago," Alexandra continued, "your father sold the shipping division to a competitor." "Without approval," I whispered. "Exactly. And guess who owns Gwendolyn Enterprises?" She flipped to the last page of the ledger. There, in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, was a single line. "Upon my death, all shares transfer to my granddaughter Sage." The room spun. "I own the company." "You've owned it for 5 years, but someone's been hiding it from you." Alexandra's eyes narrowed. "Someone who knew about the contract and the sale." "Edgar," I said. "He handled everything after Grandma died. And he's been working with your father for 30 years. Alexandra pulled out her laptop. "I did some digging. 2 days before your parents' accident, there were some unusual transfers from the family accounts." My phone buzzed, a text from Calvan. "Where are you? Edgar's having a meltdown about missing documents." "They know we found something," I said, showing Alexandra the message. "We need to move fast." She started typing rapidly. "I can help you claim Gwendolyn Enterprises, but we'll need proof of Edgar's involvement. I think I know where to find it." I remembered something from the documents. Grandma mentioned a safe in the library behind the first edition of Moby Dick. "Classic Aunt Gwen," Alexandra smiled. "But we can't just walk in there now. We need a distraction." I texted Calvin back. "Meeting with the bank about your accounts. Very concerned about some transactions. Bringing Edgar in this afternoon." "That should keep them busy," I said. "Can you get into the house's security system?" Alexandra's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Already done. Mom made me memorize all the family passwords years ago. She always said we might need them someday." "Why are you helping me?" I asked suddenly. She stopped typing and looked at me seriously. "Because Aunt Gwen helped my mom when everyone else turned their backs on her. She believed in protecting the women in this family and—" She hesitated. "I found something else in Mom's papers. Something about your parents' accident not being an accident." My blood ran cold. "What?" "We need more proof," she said quickly. "But if I'm right, Edgar's involved in something much bigger than hiding an inheritance." My phone buzzed again. Louisa this time. "Edgar just left his office looking worried. Taking his briefcase home. Something's up." "He's probably going to destroy evidence," Alexandra said. "We have to get to that safe now." I stood up, gathering the documents. "I'll create a diversion at the front of the house. Can you get in through the back garden?" "Like old times," she smiled, remembering our childhood schemes. "Meet you in the library in 20 minutes. As I headed for my car, Alexandra called after me. "Seiji, be careful. The people we're dealing with." They've already proven they're willing to kill to keep their secrets. I nodded, my grandmother's warning echoing in my head. Once you pull the thread, everything might unravel. But now I knew. The unraveling had started long before I found that first letter. I pulled up to the house just as Edgar's BMW was turning into the driveway. Perfect timing. I jumped out of my car, waving frantically. "Edgar! Thank God you're here!" I rushed toward him. "Calvin's having some kind of breakdown in the pool house. He's threatening to burn everything." Edgar's face went pale. "The documents. He's got boxes of stuff from your office. Said something about exposing everything?" He took off running toward the pool house, his briefcase forgotten on the front steps. I snatched it up and texted Alexandra. "Back door clear. He's distracted." The library doors were already open when I entered. Alexandra stood by the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, running her fingers along leather-bound spines. "Found it," she whispered, pulling out a massive volume of Moby Dick. Behind it was a small wall safe with a digital keypad. "Try 07-15-42, I said. "Grandma's birthday." The safe clicked open. Inside were more documents, a USB drive, and a small red notebook. "Jackpot," Alexandra breathed. But then we heard footsteps in the hallway. "Hide!" I shoved everything into my bag and ducked behind a heavy curtain. Alexandra slipped behind a large armchair just as Edgar burst in. "Sage," he called out. "Calvin's not in the pool house." He paused. "And my briefcase is missing." I stepped out, holding his briefcase. "Looking for this?" "Found it on the steps." "Very careless, Edgar. Someone could have taken it." His eyes darted to the bookshelf. "What are you doing in here?" "Inventory, remember. I am in charge now." I placed his briefcase on the desk. "Actually, I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about some irregularities I've found." "Everything was handled according to your parents' wishes," he said stiffly. "Really? Like the sale of the shipping division?" I watched his face carefully. "The one that should have required approval from Gwendolyn Enterprises." He went very still. "Where did you hear about that?" "Same place I heard about the transfers right before my parents' accident." I stepped closer. "Want to explain those?" "You're in over your head, Sage." His voice turned cold. "Some things are better left alone." "Like murder?" The word hung in the air between us. Behind Edgar, I saw Alexandra slowly rising from her hiding spot, phone raised, recording everything. "Your parents made their choices," he said quietly. "They knew the consequences of crossing certain people." "What people?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You really think your father built this empire legally? There are partners, silent partners, who've been involved for decades. Your grandmother knew how to handle them. Your father didn't. And now you work for them? I work for whoever ensures my survival." He reached for his briefcase. "Like you should." Is that a threat? A warning? From someone who's watched this family for 30 years? He opened his briefcase, then froze. "Where are they?" "Where are what?" "The files." He dumped the contents onto the desk. "What did you do?" I held up my phone, showing him the screen. "Texting Calvin about your meltdown was just a distraction. While you were running to the pool house, I grabbed what I needed. Amazing what you keep in here, Edgar. Offshore account numbers, correspondence about the accident, even the original contract with Gwendolyn Enterprises." "You have no idea what you're doing," he snarled, lunging for my phone. Alexandra stepped out. "But I do, and everything you just said is recorded, including that confession about the partners and the accident." Edgar's face went from angry to terrified in seconds. "You can't." "We can and we will," I cut him off, "and unless you help us. They'll kill me." "Then you better make sure we succeed," Alexandra said coldly, "because we're your only protection now." He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. "What do you want?" "Everything," I said. "Names, dates, documents, starting with who ordered my parents' murder." "You'll need somewhere safe to talk," Alexandra added, already typing on her phone. "I have a place." As we led Edgar out to Alexandra's car, I caught movement in an upstairs window. Calvin, watching us leave. I wondered if he knew anything about all this, if he was just another pawn in their game. My phone buzzed with a text from Louisa. Police just left Edgar's office. Lots of boxes taken. What did you do? I smiled, thinking of the anonymous tip Alexandra had sent about financial fraud and possible criminal conspiracy. Getting justice, I texted back. One piece at a time. In the car, Edgar stared straight ahead, defeated. Your grandmother warned them this would happen. She said her granddaughter would burn it all down. No, I corrected him, thinking of the documents in my bag. I'm not burning it down. I'm taking it back. Alexandra's safe place turned out to be a lakeside cabin an hour outside the city. As we sat around a rustic wooden table, Edgar's confessions spilled out like water from a broken dam. It started with your grandfather's gambling debts, he said, hands shaking as he clutched a coffee mug. He borrowed money from some dangerous people. Your grandmother stepped in, used her shipping business as leverage to protect the family. But Dad sold it anyway, I prompted. Your father? Edgar hesitated. He found new partners, people who promised to multiply the family fortune. They needed the shipping routes for their own purposes. Alexandra leaned forward. Money laundering, among other things. Edgar pulled out a flash drive from his pocket. Everything's here. Names, dates, transactions. Your father wanted out at the end. He threatened to go to the FBI. So they killed him, I said flatly. And my mother. Wrong place, wrong time. They couldn't risk leaving witnesses. My phone buzzed. Another text from Calvan. Where are you? Some guys in suits are here asking questions. They don't look friendly. They're moving fast, Alexandra said, reading over my shoulder. We need to get these files to my contact at the FBI. Wait, I said, something clicking in my mind. Calvin. He's alone with them. He's probably working with them, Edgar suggested. No, I stood up. He's an idiot, but he's not evil. He doesn't know anything about this. Saja, you can't go back, Alexandra warned. It's too dangerous. He's my brother. I grabbed my keys. And I'm still his guardian. Then I'm coming with you, Alexandra said, pulling out her phone. But first, we're making copies of everything. Edgar, start talking into my phone. Every detail. 20 minutes later, we had 3 copies of all files and recordings. One uploaded to a secure cloud server, one with Alexandra's FBI contact, and one hidden in the cabin. Remember, Edgar called as we headed for the door. They'll be watching the house. You can't just walk in. We're not going to, Alexandra smiled, pulling up a blueprint on her tablet. Remember how we used to sneak out as kids? Through the old service tunnel? The drive back felt endless. When we finally parked a block from the house, I could see 3 black SUVs in the driveway. 4 men inside, Alexandra whispered, checking the security feed on her phone. They're in the study with Calvin. We crept through the overgrown garden to a rusted door hidden behind thick ivy. It creaked open to reveal a narrow tunnel, a remnant from Prohibition days. Still smells like mold, Alexandra muttered as we crawled through. The tunnel led to a trap door in the wine cellar. I could hear voices above us, Calvin's scared tone and deeper threatening voices I didn't recognize. Just tell us where your sister is, kid, one man growled. This doesn't have to get messy. I told you I don't know, Calvin's voice cracked. She doesn't tell me anything. Maybe we're asking the wrong questions, another voice said. Maybe we should ask about the safe in the library instead. Alexandra grabbed my arm as I started toward the cellar stairs. Wait, she whispered, pulling out her phone. Trust me. Seconds later, police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Anonymous tip about armed intruders, she winked. The men upstairs started shouting. Footsteps thundered overhead as they rushed out. As soon as we heard cars peeling away, we emerged from the cellar. Calvin sat in the study, shaking, his designer shirt soaked with sweat. Sage! His eyes went wide. What the hell is going on? Pack a bag, I ordered. You're coming with us. But, Calvin, I cut him off, those men, they killed our parents, and they'll kill you too if you stay here. So for once in your life, just listen to me. Something in my voice must have convinced him. He nodded and ran upstairs. He'll slow us down, Alexandra warned. He's family, I said, and I'm done letting them destroy my family. Back at the cabin, Calvin listened in stunned silence as Edgar explained everything. When he finished, my brother looked at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I had no idea. All those years, I thought. I thought they favored me because I was better somehow. They favored you because you were easier to control, Edgar said quietly. Your sister was too much like your grandmother. Too smart. Too independent. My phone buzzed. Louisa. FBI just raided Edgar's house. It's all over the news. Alexandra's phone chimed next. My contact says they're moving on the partners tonight. We did it. Not yet, I said, thinking of my grandmother's papers, of the empire she built and protected. We still have to make it right. All of it. Calvin straightened up. Tell me how I can help. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. For the first time in years. First, we need to talk about Gwendolyn Enterprises. And then, we're going to rebuild this family the right way. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of FBI interviews, legal meetings, and endless cups of coffee. We'd moved our operation to Alexandra's hotel suite, which had become a makeshift command center. The partners are singing like canaries, Alexandra announced, hanging up her phone. 3 arrests so far, including the head of that investment firm Dad was dealing with. Calvin looked up from his laptop. I found something weird in the company accounts. There are regular payments to a shell corporation called Sunset Holdings. Started right after Mum and Dad died. That's their cleanup crew, Edgar said from his corner of the room. They handle problems. Like making accidents happen? I asked coldly. He nodded. And making evidence disappear. Not anymore, Alexandra grinned, showing us her tablet. FBI just froze all their accounts. They're done. My phone buzzed. Louisa. Just saw the news. You okay? Need backup? We need everyone we can trust, I replied, then looked at Calvin. Time to call in reinforcements. An hour later, Louisa arrived with takeout and her trademark determination. So, what's the plan? We're taking back the company, I said, spreading documents across the coffee table. But we need to do it carefully. The partners might be arrested, but their influence runs deep. Starting with the board meeting tomorrow, Alexandra added. They'll try to block your claim to Gwendolyn Enterprises. Calvin raised his hand like a school kid. I have an idea. What if I publicly support Sage? They won't expect that. Everyone stared at him. What? He shrugged. I can be strategic sometimes. He's right, Edgar said. The board won't know how to handle a united front. They're expecting a family feud. Then let's give them a show, Louisa grinned. I'm thinking full corporate takeover, broadcast live to all shareholders. Alexandra's eyes lit up. I can set up a secure video feed. Every investor, every board member will see exactly what we reveal. And what exactly are we revealing? Calvin asked. I pulled out our grandmother's red ledger. Everything. The illegal deals, the murder of our parents, the theft of my inheritance. But first, I turned to Edgar. We need one more confession. Edgar straightened his tie. Live on camera? They'll kill me. Not if we protect you, I said. But we need the board to hear it from someone they trust. Someone who's been there from the beginning. He was quiet for a long moment. Your grandmother always said this day would come. She made me promise to help you when it did. Then help us now, I urged. Help us make it right. The next morning, I stood outside the corporate headquarters, adjusting my blazer. Calvin fidgeted beside me in his first proper suit in years. Ready? Alexandra asked, checking her phone. Live feed is set up. Every shareholder is logged in. What if they don't believe us? Calvin whispered. They'll believe this, I said, patting my briefcase containing copies of every document, every recording, every piece of evidence we'd gathered. The elevator ride to the boardroom felt endless. When the doors opened, 12 board members sat around a massive table looking like vultures in expensive suits. Ms. Fisher, the chairman smiled coldly. This is a closed meeting. Not anymore. I nodded to Alexandra, who hit a button on her laptop. Screens around the room flickered to life, showing hundreds of faces watching remotely. "What is the meaning of this?" the chairman demanded. "Justice," I said, then turned to Edgar, who stood trembling by the door. "Mr. Mills, would you like to start?" Edgar stepped forward, his voice shaky but clear. "For 30 years, I've helped cover up crimes committed by this board, including the murder of Robert and Marie Fisher. The room erupted in chaos. Board members jumped to their feet, shouting denials, but they fell silent as Alexandra projected documents onto the main screen, proof of every accusation. "My grandmother knew what you were doing," I continued, my voice carrying across the stunned room. "She left everything to protect her family from you. And now, as the legal owner of Gwendolyn Enterprises, I'm taking back what's mine." "You have no authority," the chairman began. "Actually," Calvin stepped forward, "she does. And as the current heir to the Fisher estate, I fully support my sister's claim. It's over, gentlemen." Security guards entered, not the board's men, but federal agents Alexandra had arranged. As they began making arrests, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. For a moment I swore I saw my grandmother standing behind me, smiling proudly. "Well done, sis," Calvin said quietly. "We're not finished yet," I replied, watching the chairman being led away in handcuffs. "This is just the beginning." The media storm hit like a hurricane. By evening, every news channel was running the story. Family empire built on blood money exposed, and corrupt board members arrested in dramatic corporate takedown. I sat in my grandmother's blue room, now my office, watching the coverage on a laptop while reporters camped outside the gates. "You should see Twitter," Louisa said, scrolling through her phone. "You're trending. They're calling you the corporate avenger." "I prefer Justice Sister myself," Calvin grinned, walking in with coffee for everyone. He'd traded his usual designer clothes for a simple business suit. "The FBI just called. They need us to sign more statements tomorrow." Alexandra burst in, waving a stack of papers. "Emergency shareholders meeting in an hour. They're demanding answers." "Good." I stood up, straightening my jacket. "Let's give them some." The company auditorium was packed. Hundreds of shareholders, employees, and reporters filled every seat. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. I took the stage, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Calvin and Alexandra flanked me, a united front. "By now you've all seen the news," I began, my voice steady. "You know about the crimes committed by the previous board, about the murder of my parents, about the attempt to steal my inheritance." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But what you don't know is what happens next." I clicked a remote, bringing up financial projections on the screen behind me. Gwendolyn Enterprises was founded on principles of integrity and innovation. My grandmother built this company to last generations. Today, we return to those principles. Calvin stepped forward. "Every illegal operation has been shut down. Every corrupt contract terminated. Yes, our stock will take a hit, but we're prepared." Alexandra took over, clicking through slides. "We've secured partnerships with legitimate businesses worldwide, clean energy projects, sustainable shipping routes, technology innovations. The future of this company isn't in shadow deals, it's in transparent, ethical growth." A hand shot up in the audience. "What about the employees who didn't know about the illegal activities? Are we losing our jobs?" "No one who's innocent will suffer," I assured them. "We're establishing a transition fund to protect employees during the restructuring. Everyone will have a chance to be part of the new direction." More hands went up. Questions flew from all directions. We answered each one honestly, transparently. By the end of the hour, the mood had shifted from anxiety to cautious optimism. As the crowd filed out, an elderly woman approached the stage. "I worked with your grandmother," she said, tears in her eyes. "She would be so proud of you all." Back in the office, Edgar waited with more documents. He looked older but somehow lighter, like a man freed from a heavy burden. "The prosecutors offered me a deal," he said. "Full immunity in exchange for testimony against everyone involved. Take it. I advised. Help us clean up this mess completely. There's something else. He pulled out an old envelope. Your grandmother left this with instructions to give it to you only after everything was exposed. Inside was a single photo. My grandmother standing in front of the company's first ship, young and proud. On the back she'd written, "The truth sets us free, but love keeps us strong. Remember both, my darling girl." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A federal agent entered, looking grave. "We found something in the chairman's private files," she said, handing me a folder. "Records of other families they destroyed. Other children they orphaned." Calvin read over my shoulder, his face hardening. "We have to help them." "We will," I promised, already forming a plan. "Alexandra, can you—" "Already on it," she said, typing rapidly on her laptop. "Setting up a victims' compensation fund will make it right for everyone they hurt." Louisa, who'd been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Guys, look at this." She turned up the office TV. The news showed police leading away more executives from partner companies. The corruption network was unraveling like a pulled thread, just as my grandmother had predicted. "It's really over," Calvin whispered. "No," I corrected him, picking up our grandmother's photo. "It's just beginning. We have a legacy to rebuild." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You've made powerful enemies. Watch your back." I showed it to the others. "Let them come," Alexandra said fiercely. "They have no idea who they're dealing with now." Looking around at my unlikely team, my reformed brother, my loyal cousin, my steadfast friend, even our repentant lawyer, I felt stronger than ever. "Tomorrow," I announced, "we start rebuilding, not just the company, but everything they destroyed. Who's with me?" Every hand in the room went up without hesitation. The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery as I placed fresh flowers on my parents' grave. Behind me, Calvin adjusted the wreath on our grandmother's headstone. "The last of the trials ended today," he said quietly. 15 convictions. No deals. Grandma would have liked that. I touched her name on the cool marble. "Justice served, no compromises." My phone buzzed. Alexandra sending updates from the office. The company's stock had hit a new high, our ethical business practices attracting investors worldwide. The Victims' Compensation Fund had helped rebuild dozens of families destroyed by the old regime. "Ready for the board meeting?" Calvin asked as we walked back to the car. "Almost. Just one more stop to make." We pulled up to the state penitentiary where the former chairman awaited sentencing. The guard led me to a stark visiting room where he sat, orange jumpsuit replacing his $1,000 suits. "Come to gloat?" he asked bitterly. "No, I came to deliver this." I slid an envelope across the table. "It's a letter from my grandmother to you, dated the day before she died." His hands shook as he opened it. I watched his face crumble as he read. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew everything, right from the start." She did. And she prepared me for this moment my entire life. I stood up. "Goodbye, Richard. Enjoy your retirement." At the office, Louisa waited with Alexandra in the remodeled boardroom. The old dark wood and heavy curtains had been replaced with glass and light, symbolizing our commitment to transparency. "The shareholders are ready," Alexandra announced, pulling up the video feed. "And look who else joined." The screens showed faces I'd come to know over the past months, families we'd helped, employees who'd stuck with us, even some of our grandmother's old friends who'd emerged from hiding. "Thank you all for coming," I began. But a commotion at the door interrupted me. Edgar burst in, out of breath. "They found it! The FBI found the evidence vault!" He spread photos across the table, dozens of hidden safes in an abandoned warehouse, filled with documents dating back decades. "This is everything," Alexandra breathed, scanning the files. "Every crime, every victim, every corrupt deal they ever made." "Not just ours," Edgar added. "Other companies, politicians, criminals, it's all here." "What do we do with it?" Calvin asked. I thought of my grandmother's words. "The truth sets us free." "We release all of it," I decided. "Every document, every name, every detail. Let justice touch everyone it needs to." Some powerful people won't like that, Louisa warned. Good, I smiled. Let them come after us. We're stronger than they are. Calvin straightened his tie. I'll handle the press conference. I'll coordinate with the FBI, Alexandra added. And I'll make sure every victim knows their story will be heard, Louisa said. I looked around at my team, my family, and felt a surge of pride. We'd transformed a legacy of corruption into something meaningful, something good. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out a folder. Grandma left instructions for creating a foundation. The Gwendolyn Trust, dedicated to protecting families from corporate corruption and supporting whistleblowers. Perfect, Alexandra grinned. I already have a list of cases. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from an unknown number. Your grandmother would be proud. Keep fighting the good fight. A friend. I showed it to the others. Think we'll ever know who's been helping us? Calvin asked. Maybe not, I replied. But that's okay. We have each other. The screens behind us filled with breaking news alerts as the evidence vault contents went public. Phones started ringing. Email notifications pinged rapidly. Here we go again, Louisa said. No, I corrected her, picking up my grandmother's photo from my desk. Here we continue. This isn't an ending, it's our new beginning. Outside my office window, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the city skyline. Somewhere out there, more corrupt executives were sweating, more victims were about to find justice, and more battles awaited us. But we were ready. We had truth on our side, strength in our unity, and a legacy worth fighting for. Well, I said, turning to my team, shall we get back to work? Their determined smiles told me everything I needed to know. We weren't just honoring my grandmother's memory anymore. We were building something new, something better. And this time, we'd do it together.